Panama, Colombia, Brazil, and the United States. Strictly speaking, we also began through the United States, because on our way to Guyana, we stopped in New York, went to the 9/11 memorial, and showed our solidarity with the victims of terrorism everywhere, since, as you know, many, many nationalities lost people in that attack of 9/11. So that's been basically the nature of our journey. I would simply say that we've had a very, very positive trip so far. In every country, we have been extremely well received, in at least 3 countries at the very highest levels, and the other country at the highest level possible, since the foreign ministers, in one case, the foreign minister was away and the acting foreign minister received us, but otherwise we have been received extremely well. And what we found everywhere was that we got a very clear, unambiguous expression of not only understanding but of solidarity for us and for our message. That is essentially what I wanted to say by way of an opening remark. I'm sure you'll have more detailed questions. I'm very happy to answer them. Yeah.
Economic Times, I'm a columnist. I wanted to ask you, what was the response? If you can give us a flavor of your meetings on the Hill. Is it likely that the Senate or the House might actually say something officially in terms of a resolution or a statement?
Well, we didn't request a formal Senate resolution. Our interest was more in talking to those who were willing to talk to us and giving our point of view. But what was interesting was that in all 3 sets of conversations, we got very positive feedback from all the attendees. So we first met with the India Caucus representatives. Both the co-chairs came, a couple of others came. Then we had a meeting with the House Foreign Affairs Committee representatives, where we had the Foreign Affairs Committee and the chairs of 2 of the key subcommittees, that is the South Asia and the East Asia subcommittees. And then we had a very good session at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee with half a dozen senators, 5 of whom are on the Foreign Affairs Committee and 1 from the Intelligence Committee. So across this, we didn't have a single skeptical or negative voice. On the contrary, what we got was very, very positive responses. The 2 key lines I would use are, number 1, total support and solidarity for India in its fight against terrorism, and second, complete understanding of India's right to defend itself against terrorism. So on both these points, very, very clear, and many of them spoke. I mean, the Senate, of course, it was not possible for media to come into that area, but the 2 House meetings, as the congressmen came out, they were happy to give sound bites to awaiting media and say this on the record. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, our colleague from ANI has at least 2 or 3 congressmen on the record. Is that right, Ayushi? Yeah. So there's been, and I will say, I'm sure, judging by the tone of what they said, that if the Senate people had media available, they would have said the same thing. They were rushing off to a vote in the Senate. But broadly speaking, we have left the Hill very pleased with the quality of the conversations, the level of interest. And one thing that is you should know, because it's common not only to the Hill but to all the countries we've been to, is that though everyone knows we're there for a particular mission and they have shown all the empathy possible, at the same time there is tremendous interest in every country and on the Hill in strengthening relations with India across the board. It's not just a question of standing with us against terror. They also are thinking positively about economic development, cooperation, trade, investment. In fact, there was a separate meeting which some of us had. I couldn't go because I was at the National Press Club, but I think my colleague Shashank Mani Tripathi can tell you, Shashank, why don't you, on precisely some of these issues that came up. Yeah.
Yeah, we just came out, 3 of us, from a meeting with Chairperson Lisa McLean. She's a very senior congresswoman, and we had Operation Sindoor, which she empathized and she understood. But I think the reverse of that was what caught her attention was the phrase Viksit Bharat. When we talked about that how from approximately 4 trillion we want to at least go 5-6 times that over the next 22 years. And that economic journey is something which is attractive. And then we talked about various things in terms of digital alliances, in terms of defense, in terms of some of the things which you can do with entrepreneurship. It was very interesting that I also told her about the women reservation bill, and she was rather excited about that. I did make mention of the fact that women are balance sheet builders and men are profit and loss people, and she took that to heart. So I think there was a bonhomie which was much beyond what we have come here to do. I think we've actually delivered the core message that there is zero tolerance for terrorism, and across the patch, considering this country itself has suffered from it, there was unanimity in that. But what was really exciting, not least because of the diaspora Indian community, there was another dimension which opened up, both with respect to the diaspora as well as the economic journey that we are on.
Thank you, Shashank.
Chidanand Rajgat, Times of India. Dr. Tharoor, with your permission, may I address a question to my MP from my home state?
Oh, certainly. Certainly, Chidanand. Good to see you again, by the way.
Good to see you, sir.
Yeah.
Tejasvi Surya. Just to follow up on Bilawal Bhutto's remark, comparing Prime Minister Modi from your party to Temu and the co-version of Netanyahu. I thought it was the Pakistanis who bought from Temu and Indians bought from Amazon or one of the bigger markets. So just wanted to address that, and if you can also tell me during your discussions if you have sensed on the Hill, if you have sensed more pressure on India on your delegation to buy more arms from the United States, because the Commerce Secretary was very transparent that he wants us to not buy from Russia, stuff from the United States. So
well, thank you. Bhutto has been calling his delegation as a peace delegation, and it is quite ironical that Pakistani delegation, is speaking the language of peace. It's like the devil quoting from the scriptures. For a country that is trying to create fake heroes by promoting failed generals to field marshals, they don't know what true leaders look like. Of late, Pakistan has been surviving on cheap Chinese imports, including their military hardware, which spectacularly failed in the battlefield. So perhaps it is hard for them to digest high quality, high caliber military hardware as well as strong democratic leadership on the other side of the border. So I wouldn't fault Mr. Bhutto for the comments that he made. But I can tell you that in the last few days in the countries that we visited, as well as the discussions that we had today with various senators and congressmen, there is absolutely no sympathy towards the Pakistani cause. There has been an unequivocal support insofar as India's position is concerned. And I would just want to, take this opportunity to give you 5 names from India and Pakistan, which clearly demonstrate what India stands for and what Pakistan stands for in the American eyes. Ramzi Youssef, 1993, World Trade Center bomb blasting. David Headley, 26/11, charges of conspiracy reconnaissance. Abid Nazir, March 2015, conspiracy to bomb targets in Europe, US, work with Al-Qaeda. Syed Rizwan Farouk, San Bernardino attack, California, 14 killed, 2015 March. Abdullah Khan, Jeddah, US consulate suicide bombing, July 2016. And 5 Indian names: Indra Nui, Sundar Pichai, Ajay Banga, Satya Nadella, Kash Patel, Shantanu Narayan. I don't have to give an explanation or an introduction to any of these. This is as stark a difference as it can be between these two countries. So Mr. Bhutto's 2-day adventure here, 2-day trip here will not wash away this proven track record of Pakistan. And as far as your question about arms came, it did surface in a couple of discussions we had. But we made it very clear to the Americans that unlike Pakistan, whose bulk of armament and military hardware, 81% comes from China, India's military hardware is not only growing indigenously, but is also very diverse. We have, military hardware that we purchase from the United States, from France, from Israel. So we have a very diverse set of countries that we purchase from, with whom we have tactical and strategic partnerships. There is only one country that has perhaps the highest, it's like a vassal state, 81% of their military equipment comes from China. Thank you.
We'll take two questions at a time. First, Vishnu and then Rishi.
Good evening, Dr. Tharoor. This is Vishnu from South Asian Herald. This delegation is engaged with several countries over the past week. What has been the nature of response from leaders in those nations, and what key messages or outcomes emerge from these interactions? And also, the second question is whether
I've answered the first one, which that was my statement. Yeah. I mean, I've already answered it. No, but what's your second one?
The second is were there any notable moments or engagements during this trip that stood out to you, either symbolically or substantively? Thank you.
Well, symbolically, I'd say that in every place we've gone to, including here, where we'll do it tomorrow, we have been paying tribute to the statue of Mahatma Gandhi. What's striking is that there is no capital, it seems, where there isn't a bust, at least one, if not two or three, in the capital city, hailing Mahatma Gandhi. And it's a reminder to the world that we are a land of peace and non-violence. We don't desire war, we don't seek it. But if it is thrust upon us, we will face it with courage. And Mahatma Gandhi taught us all not to live in fear, and we will not live in fear. So that symbolically would be the one part of your question. Other memorable moments, I would do, if I think it'll be invidious if I pick out any particular meetings, because all the meetings have really been very positive. I think of several of them when I do so, the extraordinary warmth of the reception we got from the entire Guyanese establishment. We met the president. We met the former president, who's now vice president. We met the prime minister. 11 members of his cabinet attended a dinner in our honor. We met the Speaker of the National Assembly. It was extraordinary. The entire establishment of Guyana met us and gave us immense support and respect. In Panama, it was striking. I think we often joked about this amongst ourselves, that one of the things the foreign minister wanted, after he had already publicly expressed support for our stand on this particular conflict, was to have an IIT. He said, when can you bring an IIT to Panama? That was what. So, India is seen in this very, very broader, much broader light. In Colombia, we had terrific interactions right across the board. And again, what was striking with the government of Colombia was that when they spoke to us really as people they wanted to get to do more with. We had, for example, a think tank called the Colombia Council of International Affairs, which had they had academics, journalists, business people, entrepreneurs, bankers, the whole cross, and they're all gung-ho on India. I mean, for us it was, I suppose it wouldn't be right to call it a revelation, because we sort of intuitively knew that India had a certain standing, but it was for us a sort of rediscovery of how much India and India's participation in their economies and their growth and their desire to work with us comes right across. Brazil, I mean, we had really back-to-back, the vice president of Brazil, the president was away, was so incredibly warm and friendly. And again, the same thing. He had been governor of Sao Paulo earlier. He recalled an Indian company opening a big aluminium plant in his state. He wanted us to come and do more. Again, he wants to come to India. He wants Indian businesses to come. I can't tell you everywhere we went, it's been like this. I think for us, what has been gratifying is the sense that not only did we get our message across, which was the mission, but we also discovered through our presence a reaffirmation of the value of India to the world and the respect in which India is held and the potential that India is seen to have for each of them. That would be the answer to your question.
Shashi, can I just add two quick personal moments? One was when we were hosted at the National Day of Guyana, and in one of the songs, unbeknownst to us, that we would be in the audience, Rabindranath Tagore featured, which was very nice. The second moment was when a congressman in Colombia told us that he was so much involved with Vedic thought, yoga, that he has gone to India to get his marriage done, and he was actually wearing a Geneva as we spoke. So the reach of India culturally is far beyond we imagined.
So President of Guyana used the quote of Rabindranath Tagore in his Independence Day message. Yes.
Also, when Dr. Tharoor in Panama gifted a shawl from Kashmir to the Speaker of the Panamanian Assembly, she in turn gifted a warrior, a a jaguar from Panama and said, this is this is a symbol of a warrior. This is to give you strength in your fight against terrorism. I mean, this was how we were received everywhere.
Shot should have gone to the Colombian leaders. I said the shot should have gone to the Colombian leaders.
Why?
The leaders from Colombia, where you had issues, right?
Oh no, yeah. Well, in Colombia, as you know, they had issued a slightly disappointing statement at the time of Sindoor, in which they issued heartfelt condolences to the victims in Pakistan, quote unquote, and we were taken aback. And it so happened, unusually, that we began our visit to Colombia with a press conference. So at the press conference, I made it very clear already that we were very disappointed in this, and that went out. That night, the former Colombian ambassador to India had hosted a dinner for us, and there were some very senior officials there, one of whom was the director for Asia in the ministry, and I took her aside and told her this really has not been well received by us, and if something could be done. The next morning, they withdrew that statement. So, I mean, it was, for us, yes, you can see it as a fine gesture on their part, but it's also, again, a sign that they do something sometimes without particularly knowing the full context and details. Everyone is in favor of peace, and if you're far, far away from a particular conflict, you will tend to just issue something fairly routine, and then when you have the context explained and the whole circumstances explained, you could see the better of it. And I think that was again one of the benefits of this delegation going up, because if we hadn't, that might have been the last word on the record in Colombia.
Dr. Rishi Iyengar from Foreign Policy magazine.
Hi.
So India, as was mentioned earlier, there's a Pakistani delegation also in town here. India's always treated the Kashmir issue and everything around it as bilateral.
That's right.
Whereas Pakistan has wanted to internationalize it. How do you square that idea with sending out delegations such as yours to engage and frankly internationalize the issue?
No, it's not internationalizing. It's actually, each delegation is functioning in the spirit of a bilateral dialogue with the country concerned. And every time that anybody asks, and that includes on the Hill, will you talk to the Pakistanis, or would mediation help so you can promote dialogue? Our answer is very clear. We cannot talk to people who are pointing a gun at our heads. And frankly, until and unless there is a serious effort being made by Pakistan to dismantle the infrastructure of terrorism, to arrest some of the well-known figures who are on not only the United Nations Committee's list, but even in the US State Department's designated terrorist list. If they can't be arrested, if their bank accounts can't be frozen, if their training academies, training camps can't be shut down, if all of these things won't be done by Pakistan, why should we talk to them? It's very simple. I mean, if your neighbor attacks your children with their attacked dogs and then says, let's talk, will you talk to them until they put away the attacked dogs, or euthanize them, or lock them up in a kennel, or leash them at least? They've done none of those things. So for us, the message was very clear. No, we're not going to talk. And the reason we're not going to talk is because of the way they're behaving, not because we don't like to talk. I often say we can talk to Pakistan in practically every language they speak there. We have no shortage we don't need a third party to come between us and help us talk to them. But we won't talk to them until they give us some indication that they're worth talking to. I pointed out the entire experience of 2003 to 8, which was the peak of dialogue between India and Pakistan. Relations were good, there was open dialogue going on, and there was back-channel talks between Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's envoy and General Musharraf's envoy. In 2008, President Zardari's government came to power on a pro-peace with India platform. His Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi was in Delhi on the day of 26/11 to sign a liberalized visa regime with India. What happened? So while you're talking peace with these people, having dialogue, and everyone is giving you great assurances, some other elements in that society, in that state, deep or whatever you want to call it, came and started killing, in our case, 170 of our citizens, and not just our citizens, Americans and other nationalities were also killed in Mumbai in 26/11. So what is the point of talking to people if they can't even control what their own instruments, agencies and elements they have created in their society? If they can't control what they're doing to us, why bother to talk to them? if people we talk to are unable or unwilling to actually give us the peace we're talking about, then why talk?
So, just as a quick follow-up, have you had to dispel any, on your visits, have you had to dispel any sort of re-hyphenation of India?
There hasn't been, because this answer is fully understood, first of all. Nobody has pushed back, not even senators and congressmen who asked this question, pushed back when we pointed this out. They understood the logic that you don't talk to people who are doing this to you. But on the whole question of hyphenation, I've pointed out repeatedly there can be no equivalence between a country sending terrorists and a country having its civilians killed, holidaymakers, tourists, men shot down in front of their wives and children after being asked their religion. I mean, this kind of thing has been absolutely reprehensible, outrageous. Second, there can be no equivalence between people who are attacking and those who are defending themselves and their people and their territory and their sovereignty. There can be no equivalence. So there's no question. I said this is not about India and Pakistan. This is about India and terrorism inflicted on India. So India will act against terror, wherever it comes from. If it's coming from Pakistan, tough. They should deal with their own problems. And then they are going around, I understand, this delegation saying, oh, but we are also victims of terrorism. We have lost more lives to terrorism than India has, and so on. The question we turn around and say is, whose fault is that? As Hillary Clinton famously said 10 years ago, what did she say? You can't breed vipers in your backyard and expect it to bite only your neighbors. It's the old classic lesson of Dr. Frankenstein. You build a monster, it leaves your control. That's why they're now getting terrorist attacks by the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. But who created the Taliban from which the Tehreek-e-Taliban broke off? We all know the answer to that. So let Pakistan look inside itself. Let it do some serious interior reflection before it goes around pleading innocence and deniability and everything else.
So can I just add one sentence here? On the question of hyphenation, over the last 10 days in the last 4 countries and today including the United States, one consistent theme in all of our conversations has been, after we complete the agenda of Operation Sindoor, every country, irrespective of where we went, wants to engage with India on a multiple other issues. They spoke about technology, they spoke about agro-processing, they wanted IITs, they wanted India to help them in building their digital infrastructure. Guyana wanted help in infrastructure to energy. Practically every country wants to engage with India on all of these other matters, because that's so much of value that India brings to the world and to the table. So we are the world's 4th largest economy, we are a young nation, we are co-creators of so many emerging technologies in the world. So the world sees what India is and for India's potential, and that's clearly not the case with Pakistan at all.
And just to one last thing on that, I also felt that, especially on the Hill, there was a fairly bipartisan acceptance that as the largest, vibrant, fairly diverse democracy, both nations together have a lot to offer to a world which, whether we like it or not, is tilting a bit towards more authoritarian places. So this agenda of economics, after understanding the core point, but also a larger, longer term play of democracy across the world was very central.
By both nations, you mean India and the US?
India and the US, but I would argue that when we went to Colombia, we had the same issue. When we went to Brazil, we had the same understanding. So many democracies that we visited, all of them are democracies, really appreciated the fact that we're doing what we're doing by being democratic.
So Rich, India Today, there is a copycat delegation that we've been talking about, which is visiting the US from the Pakistani side. They are also getting the same kind of meetings in Washington, DC, at least that we know of. Other Western powers...
They got the Pakistan Caucus, which is how many members? We got the India Caucus, which is how many members? I ask you, Rohit, you're covering all this from here. You know the...
So my question to you
they're not exactly identical meetings.
Given that what you've said and what we've seen in the past 2 weeks or so, when it comes to the Western powers, are they still drawing a false equivalence with India and putting and hyphenating India and Pakistan?
I don't think so, and that's exactly the answer the three of us have been giving, is that I don't think that in our conversations we got the sense of that. There was certainly a fear expressed by our friend from Foreign Policy magazine, Rishi Iyengar, which is a common fear, right? That, you guys are going outside and talking about this particular incident. Doesn't that again rehyphenate? And my answer to you is no, because that's not the way we are talking. We are not there, as I say, with a message about India versus Pakistan, this quarrel for so long and so on. That's not the issue. It's about India as a democracy facing terror, and as a country that basically has been focused on its own economic development, on its growth story. Even Kashmir was a story of prosperity, of booming economy. I told the Americans we had more tourists in Kashmir last year than Aspen, Colorado receives. We had a 100% increase in the first 3 months of this year from the first 3 months of last year. This was what Kashmir was all about. There's prosperity around. Kashmiris are getting money in their pockets from Indian tourists coming. This is the kind of thing these terrorists are trying to target. So it is undermining the India growth story, undermining the Kashmiri economy, trying to promote alienation. Why do they go around asking people their religion and shooting them? And then when one horrified wife screamed, "Kill me too," they said, no, you go back and tell them. They wanted a backlash from India. They wanted a communal backlash from India. And this is why I must say, I'm so proud of my countrymen and women that apart from a few heightened passions on the first 24 hours, thereafter the way in which the country rallied together and stayed united on this. And when Operation Sindoor was conducted, you remember the briefings, that of the three briefers, 2 were women and 1 was a Muslim woman officer. Of all these delegations, none of our delegations is without at least 1 Muslim member, sometimes more. Sarfraz Ahmed is with me here, and he can speak very, very openly about the fact that this is about terrorism. It's not about religion. It's not about communal issues. It's not about bilateral India-Pakistan historical antecedents, whatever. It's pure and simple about one set of people using terrorism as an instrument of state policy. And the world doesn't want it. The world doesn't accept it. The world doesn't think this is a technique anybody should be allowed to use. Which is why the Pakistanis have to go around now and say, oh, we are also victims of terrorism. They created, incubated, nurtured, financed, guided, and gave facilities and safe haven and land to these terrorists.
Just to complete that thought, I think the reason that we have had an easier time, is because consistently over the last 30 years, there's a track record of cross-border terrorism, which is evident, and Mumbai is one example. But there's also a track record of export of terrorist infrastructure, especially software, across the world. And this nation has suffered that, and our first stop symbolically was 9/11. So when we make that argument today, there isn't that much of, lack of belief. There is a view that this is not just an India problem. We are here because India was terrorized, but indeed it's a global problem. And what has happened in Boulder, Colorado, in some ways an indication of that it's lurking around the corner.
Yudhiji Bhattacharjee with the New York Times Magazine, the attack in Pahalgam was one in a long line of attacks. And one thing that's happened every time there's been a terrorist attack, like Mumbai, the one in Pathankot, the one in Pulwama, the Indian government has come out with evidence, maybe not immediately, but after a while, that show 2 things. One, that the perpetrators were Pakistani, or they were funded by the Pakistanis. And 2, that these elements, the attackers themselves, were under the control of the Pakistani intelligence establishment. As you've gone around talking to the Hill and agencies and government representatives, have you been asked for that kind of evidence as it relates to the Pahalgam attack? Because we haven't seen it yet. I'm not doubting it. I'm just asking.
Well, it hasn't come up in most of our substantive meetings, but media likes to ask this question, Mr. Bhattacharya. So I can tell you that we have been asked as recently as the National Press Club this afternoon. So it's a question that media likes to ask, and I can give you an answer, frankly, which had we been asked in our meetings, we would have given anyway. Number 1, we have got a pattern since 1989 of repeated attacks, every one of which was denied by Pakistan and every one of which has been traced to Pakistan. The most famous or notorious cases have been Mumbai, 9/11. Pakistan's denials are on record, and then one of the terrorists was captured alive, and of course his address in Pakistan, where he lived, who trained him, where he was trained, everything was compiled. You remember that Western intelligence agencies, apart from our own, had recorded the chilling voice of that handler calling and giving minute-by-minute killing instructions from Pakistan to the killers. It is no longer possible for Pakistan to keep on denying. And yet, to this day, the dossier is compiled with all that evidence. Not one person has been prosecuted, not one person has been punished in Pakistan. But that's the pattern, and I agree that you can have somebody who does the same crime 99 times, and maybe the 100th time he didn't do it, right? Okay, so let me say the next one. When this thing happened, in less than an hour after the killings in Pahalgam, in this meadow, the LET front organization, proxy organization called the Resistance Front, claimed credit. Now, most of us didn't even know